Yeah. Okay, so we have spoken about marketing plans before in a previous class. However, I just wanted to spend a few more minutes talking about marketing plans um, tonight because, you know, when you graduate and you move forward into your managerial positions and that kind of a thing, it's entirely feasible that, in fact, you will be at one point or another involved in some kind of planning process, right? Whether it's a marketing plan or business plan or some kind of planning process. And much of what we can talk about here with regard to marketing plans can be leveraged and applied to other types of planning scenarios. And so, therefore, with that in mind, in my opinion, it behooves us to sort of think a little bit more about marketing plans. We want to talk more about it for a few minutes here and now. Furthermore, we recognize that, you know, unlike previous sessions here within our MOM program and marketing courses that I've taught, I've always used the marketing plan as a means a basis, if you will, for student projects, student group projects, where I've had student groups go out into the field to different businesses and engage in the formulation of a marketing plan. Here, this term, I did not do that. And so that, of course, translated into some pragmatic benefits for you, namely that it's freed up a whole lot of time for you because you weren't involved in that very time consuming process. But I guess on the downside, it really didn't give you a chance to sort of think too much about marketing plans. So, again, hence, I just want to talk a little bit more about marketing plans. So, really, you know, when we talk about plans, certainly in this context, marketing plans, it's all about sort of the conceptual notion of being at a particular place and wanting to get to another place. So we're at our point A and we want to go someplace. We want to get to a point B, which is some time in the future. And so we say, okay, we need to get from here to there, right? So we formulate this marketing plan, which is good, and we proceed accordingly. Now, one of the key things then, though, that we want to recognize is that when we sort of articulate this point B, how can we articulate that point B? Where are we going in the future? Well, really, it's captured by these very, very important things that we've spoken about before, objectives. Critically important, right? Objectives. We need to be very deliberate and careful with regard to how we formulate them and determine exactly what objectives we are seeking. By the way, I mean, lest you think that it's not particularly important, I mean, I don't know whether you've heard, I think I might have mentioned him sometime, some past time in the course, the very great, I say great, prolific father of modern management, the great management thinker, Peter Drucker, really in about the 1970s and 80s, conceptualized this notion that he called management by objectives, MBO, where he basically outlined a very comprehensive case in much of his writings, where he published like over 38 books, by the way, on management. But he basically captured this notion of management by objectives. And in it, in this notion, he sort of captures the essence of having immediate or short term kinds of objectives and subsequently more long term subsequent kinds of objectives, right? So, very important to realize that. Of course, we realize from a marketing perspective that our objectives and where we go have to be in sync with and supportive of the overall corporate firm level strategy and the firm level objectives, of course. So we recognize that Furthermore, we recognize that when we develop and articulate objectives, they absolutely must fulfill some key criteria, right? So they must fulfill the criteria that's laid out in the acronym SMART, right? Specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, relevant, and based on time, timeliness, right? The major components of objectives. So, or requirements, I should say, of objectives. So if I were to say something like increase market share, increase market share. Is that an objective? Is that an objective? And the answer obviously is no, that is not objective. That's nonsense, frankly. So how would we translate what I just said then into more of a formalized objective then? Well, we could say something like to increase our market share by 10% by the end of the third quarter of the year 2023, right? What is that? That is a very, very clear, specific, time-based objective. And that's key. So you should very much understand that. Now, that's all well and good, right? That's into the future, you know? So the other half of the planning process then is to very, very carefully determine where we are now. And that is easier said than done, right? Where are we now in terms of, whatever the context is? Where are we now? So there are a variety of tools that can certainly help us determine where we are now, and as well as help us with the formulation of our future objectives. But where are we now? Well, we can adopt the framework that we call SWOT, right? And we have spoken about that before in our class. So we can have a look internal to the firm, determine what our strengths and weaknesses are, and then look outside of the firm and examine our opportunities and strengths. So we can do that. Furthermore, you will realize that when we talk about SWOT, not only is it important to very comprehensively and deliberately determine all of those elements, all of those points that reside under those rubrics, but it's critically important to extract information from each one of those points, right? And we do that by subsequently asking ourselves, what, so therefore, or so what, so what, so what, so what, we have adequate financial health within the firm, the strength. So what? So what? So what? So what? And we keep asking ourselves that. So really, the real value of SWOT resides in being able to extract all that information out of the analysis. And so that really is where it is at with respect to SWOT. And of course, there are a variety of other frameworks that can assist us, right? We all know PEST. We can use PEST. We can use Porter's 5-Force model and a bunch of others, right? All with a view to trying to really determine where we are now. So furthermore, it's important when we try to determine where we are now to try to engage in a cause effect kind of an analysis. In other words, for example, if we find ourselves at a particular point of time having lost, let's say for argument's sake, as an example, we have lost, say, 25% of market share over the last 2 years, let's say. That's very substantial, right? And that is very worrisome. And that's where we are now. We've lost that significant amount of market share, and the trend continues to go down. So then we say to ourselves, ooh, that's not good. What is going on here? And so then what is important is to start asking ourselves, well, why? What is contributing to this? In other words, what are the causes that are resulting in this effect? And then there are a variety of ways by which we can do that, right? And we can lay it out graphically, right? And when you looked at that Ivy template that I produced for you and I gave it to you, for the case preparation, there's embedded in that what we call a herringbone analysis, which is a cause and effect kind of way where we can, capture that effect, in this case, a loss of 25% of market share, and then go backwards and try to determine what are the causes that might have contributed to that. And it's very important to have a look at that kind of objective analytical approach to those kind of effects. So what could be the cause? Well, it could be a variety of things, right, that we don't know until we analyze it and look into it. Perhaps there was a drop in product quality. Perhaps there was a sudden shift in consumer needs and wants. Maybe our product life cycle has matured or moved into more of a decline all of a sudden. Perhaps competitor actions have sort of overridden and usurped our market share. Maybe our pricing model has been incompatible with our target market. Maybe our marketing efforts in terms of our communications isn't appropriate. Maybe we're not communicating with our target market. Whatever the cause is. So there are all kinds of things then that we want to have a look at, all with a point here to trying to examine that cause and effect kind of notion here, which is so important. And so that, again, is an integral component of trying to determine where we are, which, of course, positions us to determine where we want to go in the future, right? So that's sort of the conceptual backdrop here against a planning process. And so we realize then that, our core marketing strategy then, we talked about it last class, can be based very broadly, more along the lines of a positioning based kind of an approach versus more of a growth based kind of an approach, right? Depending on what our overall corporate strategy objectives are, right? So we realize that. So, right, so we know then where we are, and then we say, okay, via a comprehensive set of marketing objectives, this is where we want to go in the future. And then we say, okay, well, how do we get there then? And then we say, well, we develop and we adopt and execute a comprehensive marketing program, which is really comprised of a very careful development of our 4P framework, right? In terms of the product, how we distribute it, get it into the hands of the consumer, how we price it, how we communicate it out, we determine all of the details associated with those P's, for example. And of course, one of the overriding notions here that informs the development of our marketing program as captured by the 4Ps is really, what kind of resources do we have available to us? What kind of resources can we bring to bear on the execution of our marketing program? In other words, are there adequate financial resources? Do we have the financial resources in place to be able to fund what we want to do with our marketing program? And that is why you remember for each of the cases that we did, I emphasized to you that it was critically important right up front to have a look at the financial resources of the firm. What kind of financial health do we have? And it's the same thing. Just think of a personal household kind of purchase, right? Or investment or anything. What's the first thing we need to do before we determine whether we're going to buy a house or a car or anything else? We want to have a look at our own personal financial snapshot and status and determine whether or not we can afford it really, right? Can we afford our Visa bill moving on into the future? Can we afford these kind of a thing? So it's the same kind of a thing, right? So accordingly, yes, as we move forward with typically our, long-term or 5-year plan, we want to project out financially based on that financial picture and using some appropriate planning figures. We want to plan out the the financial projections moving forward, to determine whether we can afford it or not, and if so, how, and in turn, what will be the financial implications of a successful execution of our marketing program as best as we can estimate it moving forward. And of course, we estimate it by very carefully determining what planning assumptions we need to use. For example, will the GDP, will the economy expand by a certain amount? Can we expect our, customer base to increase? What's happening demographically, economically? I mean, especially these days, right now. I mean, we're experiencing quite extensive inflationary trends right now, right? So, if we were engaged in this kind of planning right now, inflation, rates of inflation, and the resultant effect that inflation has on the economy would have to be taken into consideration for assumptions developed accordingly and then integrated into our financial projections moving forward. So this then is the kind of thinking that we want to bring to bear when we talk about marketing plans. Okay. And I guess the last point that I would emphasize is that, a plan has to be practical, and we have to be able to execute it, and it has to be essentially implementable. So in other words, it does no good to come up with an airy fairy kind of all kinds of esoteric, kinds of ideas here in the plan, unless we can actually implement it. And so that is the ultimate desire here of a marketing plan, and that is to be implementable, and that is key. And furthermore, by the way, I always suggest that there are a couple of key components also that should be integrated into a marketing plan. We should very, very carefully determine and articulate exactly what our brand is. In other words, we need to develop and articulate and capture a branding statement, our brand statement. What exactly is the brand? Who's it for? What does it do? What are the benefits that accrue to the consumer from the brand? That's the kind of thing we want to capture in a statement, a brand statement. That should be embedded into a marketing plan. Also, our positioning, a positioning statement should be captured and embedded into a marketing plan also. Positioning, where does the brand or the product, where does it reside in the mind of the consumer? Bearing in mind the key attributes that we use to sort of describe the positioning of it. So that's another key component. So yeah, those are some thoughts on marketing plans. And in a pragmatic way, of course, you will see a fairly good marketing plan and sort of a how-to kind of approach to it, as indicated in your textbook at Appendix A, I think it is, at the back end, where they talk about marketing plans. It's quite good. And so that you should, keep on hand, especially when you graduate and you move away. One of the benefits of a university education, MOM, MBA, is not only learning and knowing material and attaining that knowledge, but equally important, I would argue, is just knowing where to go to get knowledge. That is a huge, huge value added component of a university education, I would argue. So, ladies and gentlemen, that really concludes some of the key points that I had wanted to articulate to you with regard to marketing plans. I don't think there's anything else I really want to add with regard to that now. So I hope you remember the key things. I hope you've captured this and remember it. Are there any questions or points of clarification on that, by the way, at all, anywhere? No? So at this point then, let me just talk about the final exam a little bit. Okay, thank you. Let me talk a little bit about the final exam then. I'm still in the process of finalizing the final exam, which of course, when are we writing it again? It's on the 15th of December at 8:30 in the morning, right? That we know, right? Right. 15th at 8:30 in the morning. So make sure that you're not late. Make sure that you know, if you miss it, you know, that will not be good for you. So make sure you are there. Make sure that you position yourself appropriately such that you have appropriate computer functionality and internet functionality and all that kind of stuff, right? That's up to you. That's your responsibility to sort out, okay? So you guys need to figure all that out and make it happen. That's up to you, you know? And yeah, so be aware that that's up to you to sort out. And furthermore, it's not up to me to come up behind you and figure out, you know, your problems with regard to decisions and precautions that you should have taken with regard to adequate preparation. So it's up to you to adequately prepare, right? As opposed to failing to prepare adequately, having something go wrong, and then contact me and asking me to fix some bad decisions that you made. So please do not let that happen. So it's up to you to sort out that, ladies and gentlemen. So the final exam, I anticipate that the final exam will be probably between about 75 and 80 questions. And those will be multiple choice questions. And they will be fairly short and to the point questions. So you won't have, you know, these multiple or these long multi-paragraphed blah, 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 blah kind of questions. I hate those. You know, when I was a student, you had to plow through all this material and you look at it and you go, oh, are you kidding me? So yeah, no, they're to the point. So you will have probably, and I have yet to very deliberately and think through very carefully the amount of time, but it'll probably be about an hour or so to do these in, an hour to 70 minutes maybe. I'll think it through very, very carefully once I determine the nature of the questions and however many questions within that, say, 75 to 80 question window, so to speak. The emphasis will definitely be on the material that we covered post midterm. Now, you know, I always get the question, are we responsible for everything? Well, yeah, you're responsible for everything because marketing is not a discipline whereby we can sort of chop it in half and do a mental dump of the first half and just focus in on the second half. Marketing doesn't work that way, right? As you should understand at this point, everything is based on everything else, right? So it's all sort of intertwined. So it's not like biology or math or physics or chemistry or something where we can just chop a course in half and say, okay, everything that you did before the midterm, forget all that. Now just focus in on that. It just doesn't work that way, right? It's not a discipline that lends itself to that. So therefore, yes, we do need to know everything. However, make no mistake, the emphasis on the material in the questions will absolutely cover the material, mainly, not exclusively, mainly, the material that we covered post midterm. And in terms of preparation, consistent with what I have been saying throughout the course and what I wrote in the course outline, again, stating it again, as I have stated like about 50 times so far, my advice to you is to really know the stuff that we cover in class. Okay, know that very well, know it cold. Again, consistent with what I've been saying throughout the course. So there's nothing new here, right? So that is my advice to you. And by the way, as I've mentioned to you before, those students who do take my advice, like this, do well. And those students, sadly, heartbreakingly, who choose to reject my advice, don't do well. It's a very simple calculus. And we saw that in the midterm exam too. Students who did do what I told them to do, like this, did very well. And those who rejected my advice and didn't learn the material and didn't know the material that we cover in class especially well and didn't study very hard did not do very well. It's a very simple thing. And I say this with respect, by the way. I'm trying to be very respectful here. I'm not trying to be nasty or mean here. So yeah, and also, by the way, in violation of my own rule, where I had said at the outset of the course that I would put up the recordings for 1 week and then take them down, put them up for 1 week to enable students who, for whatever reason, missed a class or technical reasons or whatever, need to review the material again and again take notes. Another piece of advice, by the way, take notes off of the recordings. It'll give those students an opportunity to do that. Within the week, I wanted to avoid sort of a binge watching kind of process the night before the exam kind of a thing. I wanted to avoid that because that's not really conducive to learning and preparation, I believe. And that's why I had decided at the front end that I would just leave them up for that 1 week period. So at any rate, I'm violating that own rule and I've left them up, by the way. So all of the sessions that we recorded after the midterm are up and available for you. Pre-midterm, I took them down before the midterm, like half an hour before the midterm. But all of the ones post-midterm are still there, available for your viewing, which again, in terms of review, it's all there. It's all there. So when I say learn it, there's no reason why not to, because it's all there for you to learn it. It's all recorded and available for you. So again, I strongly advise you to get in and learn it well. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, our sessions really for the midterm were sessions 1 through 9. And of course, everything after that was post midterm right up until now, really. So yeah, I mean, before the midterm, we covered some important topic areas. I mean, we covered, global marketing. We talked about market research, right? So when we talk about, for example, marketing plans and that kind of a thing, and determining where we are and that kind of a thing, how do we do that? Well, we engage in market research, right? Market research is a huge component and has a huge role to play in marketing planning, right? And we spoke at length about market research during our session number 3, actually. So it's very important here. I mean, in marketing, we're always concerned about relationships, causal relationships, right? So we talked about these different types of relationships at that time. We talked about techniques. We talked about all that kind of stuff, right? Very important, right? That market research stuff that we talked about, you know. Furthermore, we also recognize, that, they're very important, fundamental, foundational notions in marketing that you should, at this point, you should absolutely know cold. I mean, we talked about positioning. That's a very, very important concept in marketing. Segmentation. We talked all about segmentation, during that session number 3 and some into 5, where we talked about consumer behavior. These are fundamental concepts in marketing. So absolutely, this is a course on marketing. Yes, you should know this, you know. We recognize, further on, the whole notion of consumer behavior that we spoke about, in our session number 5. We talked about consumer behavior and organizational buying behavior. We talked about consumer behavior, at length then and throughout the course, really, where I had emphasized to you that, in my humble opinion, it's critically important that firms adopt what I call that consumer-centric approach, right? Whereby everything within the firm should be done and executed with a view to keeping the consumer at the forefront of all activities. Critically important, right? So we have to understand the consumer, and we talk about that. What about satisfaction? That's an important construct in marketing, right? How does satisfaction work? How do we conceptualize it? Critically important. We spoke at length about that, right? And I talk about how important adopting that consumer-centric approach is. I mean, it's just not little old me. Just look at the great marketing guru, Steve Jobs himself. I mean, Jobs himself said that, essentially, as you will recall the video that you watched during our session number 5, right? So these are all key things, right? So after the midterm, yeah, we talked about channels of distribution, right? It's all about getting that product into the hands of the consumer and how that works. We talked about retailing, that last channel, right, where the product meets the consumer. And we talked about that beautiful, simple little framework that we call the retail value proposition. Remember? Selection, experience, convenience over price. We talked all about that and different configurations of retailing. We then talked about personal selling, which is important, right? Salesforce management, how the Salesforce is compensated, how it's managed, how territories are set up, right? Territories. We spoke about territories and aspects associated with territories we spoke about. We talked about pricing for 2 whole sessions. We talked about pricing, right? Talked about loss aversion, leading into prospect theory, which in turn was extended into mental arithmetic, right? The work of Richard Thaler. We talked all about that, right? Very important, right? Pricing, critically important. We talked all about that. Then we talked about promotion, right? That P in our 4P framework, promotion. And then, of course, we realize under that P, there are a whole lot of, component aspects that we call the promotional mix or communication mix that resides under that P, right? Direct marketing, advertising, sales promotion, personal sales, publicity, PR, miscellaneous other aspects, right? All those key aspects. And then we talked about that personal favorite of mine and the domain of much of my research, which is in service marketing, right? On the 22nd. That's a very important aspect of marketing too. And growing, important now and growing, right? Service marketing. And then, of course, last class, we talked about where the marketing field is going, right? And we talked about some very large conceptual macro aspects and where the field is going, right? In terms of, remember, the 4E framework and that kind of a thing, right? So, yeah, we want to realize that and understand it. So, yeah, these are all key things, right? And so these are all important things that we as marketers do, and we have to realize and understand, right? And we understand also, by the way, that nothing is stationary. Everything is in flux, which makes our job very difficult, right? Everything is continually changing. Even the product life is changing, right? Remember, we talked several times about our product life cycle, right? You've done it in your Connect assignments, right? The product life cycle, that sort of curve that sort of captures, the introduction, the growth, the maturity, and the decline of a product. And we recognize that of those four major stages, from a marketing perspective, we think about different things at each stage, generally speaking, right? Very broadly, we have different major marketing objective at each stage, right? That's important to know, right? I mean, this is all fundamental to marketing. And at each stage, in terms of our marketing program, i.e., our four stages, we think about doing different things to our marketing program at each one of those four major stages over the course of the product life cycle. So these are important things to think about, right? So these are, we want to grip these kind of things because this is really what marketing is all about. So yeah, those are some thoughts with regard to the course and the content overall. And yeah, and I guess it's worth saying also that the time that I invariably will determine will be plenty of time for you to read, think about it, and answer the question. Read, consider, and then answer the question, right? There will be time to do that. And I will very carefully and deliberately plan the time accordingly, recognizing that this is a closed book exam, and here I appeal to your ethical conduct and ethical behavior. Again, capitalizing on your integrity. What is integrity? Doing the right thing when nobody is watching. So I appeal to your personal sense of character and integrity here. Um, and So when you study for a closed book exam and you study and you learn stuff, you commit it to memory and you understand things and you know, you learn it. And that way there's plenty of time to read and answer questions, right? No time to be looking up questions. I always know, and again, I say this with the greatest of respect, and this is not directed to anybody here, and I'm not directing it to you guys. I'm just speaking very broadly, very generally. But whenever students come back to me afterwards and say, I didn't have enough time, well, that is a big red flag to me that, frankly, yes, you did have time. However, you didn't study, you didn't learn the material, and you tried to look up the answers, and that flopped. That's how you ran out of time, frankly, right? I mean, I'm not a moron, I'm not an idiot. I know that's the kind of thing that some students sadly will try to do. And they will not be successful in that, by the way. So, again, just saying. And again, I'm not accusing anybody of doing that. I'm just saying, you know. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty well it. If there are any points of clarification or anything, um, by all means, don't hesitate to let me know. Any questions or anything? Yeah. Yeah, once I've determined the precise number of questions and time and that kind of a thing, I definitely will disseminate that on a Blackboard announcement email. Good. Oh yes, I should also say another thing. Um, with regard to your assignments, immediately after submission at 2 o'clock, my very efficient and effective and outstanding TA, Kyle, launched into the grading of them. Like he has like in the order of about 300 of these things to read through in a very careful and deliberate way. But he is absolutely involved in the grading as we speak. And so please do be kind of patient here. He's a one-man show essentially, and he's grading. I have him grading all of them, and he is in the process of doing that. So be patient, and once the grades are formulated, he will disseminate them. So that should happen relatively soon. So yeah. So yeah, that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. If there are any questions, I'll hang around, but I guess that's about it. So yeah, that's about it. So yeah, and that's another thing I should say to you guys too. And I say this to my MOM class. I mean, you guys have been great overall. You guys have been great. I could not have enjoyed my interaction with you guys more. I found you very engaging. I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and that's why I love my MOM students so much, because I always find that I learn so much from my students. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and that's why this profession that I am in is just so warm and beautiful, because I have, from a selfish perspective, I personally have all of this exposure to all of you wonderful people and your thoughts and your different cultures from different parts of the world. And I learned so much about, the different parts of the world, from India to China to Bangladesh to South Korea to Iran, to Arabic nations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just absolutely beautiful, and I love it. And so, yeah, so thank you for um, for expanding my knowledge, and I do appreciate that immensely. So thank you, and it's been really great, having this contact with you guys. I really have enjoyed it, and of course, in our time together, I believe I take my professional duty very, very seriously. And I believe as part of my professional duty as a university professor, you know, to to recognize that I am here primarily to facilitate your education. I'm not here necessarily to make you memorize drills and stages and steps of things, right? If I was in a college, at a St. Clair College or an Algonquin College or a community college, and I was teaching bricklaying or how to be a teller in a bank or something like that, no disrespect to tellers or bricklayers or anything, and I teach a series of drills, that's one thing, right? But I'm not here. We're at a university setting, right? Which is where we want to really learn how to think critically and to critically evaluate things, right? And that's what we want to do. And that I see as being a fundamental duty embedded in me as a university professor to facilitate that in my students. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I strive to do, to try to get my students to think, right? Which is tough for a student's perspective because and I know for a fact, I'm human too. It's a natural human condition to want to position ourselves squarely in the middle of our little comfort zone, and where everything is very secure and nice, and we know stuff, and we don't have to work too hard, we don't have to stress too much. That's a natural kind of a human thing, right? But the problem with that the problem with that is that it doesn't develop our character, it doesn't develop our critical thinking, it doesn't really do anything for us as people, right? It doesn't develop our spirit, our soul, our character. And that's what we need to do, I believe, in life. We need to develop our character and develop our critical thinking. moving forward. And so I see that as being a fundamental duty of mine to help you do that. Now, the thing is, of course, from a student's perspective, and I get it, right? I've been there, I know it. In fact, I still am. When we learn something new, uh, it's kind of a pain in a sense. Yes, it is. It can be exciting and invigorating, and I've hoped that this course has been exciting and invigorating. But whenever we learn something new, we're stretching our psychological boundaries. We're stretching our mind. We're stretching our boundaries. And it's a painful process, right? It's just like when we're working out on weights, right? And we're, doing bench press or working our arms or something, right? It's a painful process, right? When we stretch ourselves like that. So here, this is what we're trying to do, right? So I see it as my job to try to push. So I push my students to try to get them to think and expand their thinking, right? And so that's why I make the concerted attempt in as gentle and a kind and respectful way as I possibly can, but still push all of my students, right, to try to be better people and to learn and to think critically, right, which is important at this university level, I believe. And so that's sort of my philosophy, if you will, on education and trying to not only just teach, but push students and encourage students to think critically and to carefully consider things, right? And that has been a sort of a theme, I think, that I have tried anyway to bring to the course, as I do in all my courses, frankly. But yeah, yeah. So anyway, it's been wonderful. I wish I had the opportunity to get to know you better, but we do the best we can. We play the hand that we are dealt, so to speak. And this is probably about the best that we can do in this virtual environment. So, with that in mind, I'll ask you, please do keep in touch with me. I love keeping in touch with my students after the course. Please do keep in touch. And if there's any questions or anything that come up along the way, don't hesitate to let me know. Any questions in terms of your preparation, points of clarification, let me know. The only thing I would ask you is before you ask, just make sure that the answer is not contained in the course outline. And also make sure that the answer isn't contained in any of the material that's recorded. But certainly, if you wish further explanation, I'm more than happy to do so. Just flip me an email and we can meet in the room here and we can chat more. So that would be fine. I love chatting with my students anyway, in case you haven't guessed. So, yeah. In my office at Odette, I mean, I would very often, I would work, well, I work all day and into the night too, with my research and writing and everything. And, I would very often, students would come in at night and, we'd sit in my office and we would, have lengthy conversations in the evening sometimes, and those were all very warm, lovely memories that I have, you know, yeah, of just interchanging and learning and, conversing with my students. It's a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's why this profession of academia is so beautiful, really, because of that. Just a beautiful exchange of ideas and thinking and yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'll hang around in case there's anything else, but I think that's probably it, ladies and gentlemen. In case if you have any questions, by all means, let me know. But that's pretty well it. Let me shut the recording down here.